Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon deck profile video. So today I'm going to be taking a look at BT07, and BT07 offers us lots of new and powerful cards to build some new and exciting decks with. And in today's profile I'm going to be covering the Green Hybrids deck. So the Green Hybrids deck is a brand new deck to BT07, and even though Green Hybrids has existed since BT06, there really wasn't enough of them to do much of anything outside of being a support package. And now that we have more cards to, well, actually support a Green Hybrids deck, it's looking to be a pretty strong deck that's focused around what Green generally does, trying to evo fast into your high levels, and just use your high levels to try to beat up on the opponent's Digimon for additional benefits. And this is just fitting that mold quite nicely, just because we have lots of different moving parts and pieces to make it kind of float and function slightly different than your average deck. So without further ado, onto the deck profile. Starting off with the Digitama, I'm going to be running one copy of Minomon as the 5th Digitama. It doesn't necessarily matter what you use as the 5th Digitama, if you even want to use a 5th Digitama. I'm just using Minomon because it's a nice generic way to try to DP boost our Digimon with his inheritable ability of, when attacking, not limited to once per turn. If you attack one of your opponent's Digimon, then this Digimon gains plus 1000 DP, trying to ensure that your Digimon is going to be stronger than theirs. And then as far as the main Digitama goes, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Pinamon. So Pinamon is going to be that Digitama draw engine, except it's not the best at doing that, but it's still better than nothing. So what this card is doing is it has the inheritable ability of when attacking once per turn. If you attack an opponent's Digimon, it doesn't even mean that you have to live or die by it, it just means you have to attack. Then you get to draw 1 card, and well, Green already wants to be attacking into the opponent's Digimon, so it only makes sense for us to use this type of card to try to act as our draw engine. Next, on to the level 3s, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Betamon. So Betamon is that stereotypical digger where he has this on-play ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck and add 1 green level 4 Digimon or 1 green Tamer from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So it's not the best digger, but it's still trying to dig out our Digimon and it's still trying to dig out our Tamers, so that just makes it a decent card to be using. Next, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Tentomon. So this is the classic collection version of Tentomon, and we're using this card for its very nice inheritable ability that does have some synergy with the deck. So its inheritable ability states that when attacking the next time one of your Digimon digivolves into a Digimon with Insectoid or Ancient Insectoid in its traits, then we get to reduce that memory cost of that Digivolution by 1. So it's just making our Digivolutions into some of our other Digimon a little bit cheaper than they normally would, which is generally a good thing because that's what Green wants to do, is try to be as tempo efficient as it possibly can be. Next up, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Tentomon. So Tentomon here is, for all intents and purposes, a flex spot. You don't necessarily have to run this card if you don't want to. You could run something like a 2-drop vanilla in its place instead, just because those are still decent cards. But I do value what Tentomon is doing, just because he's still one of the better ways that Green has to draw cards on its rookie level. So his on-play ability states that you get to reveal the top card of your deck, and if that card is a green Digimon, then we get to add it to our hand, otherwise it goes to the bottom. So for the most part, it has a relatively high chance of success, even though it still can whiff like all of the other diggers. It's still just a good card to use because it's still digging through our deck. And then the last level 3 is going to be Bokomon. You can't necessarily run a hybrid deck without Bokomon, just because Bokomon is one of the best, if not the best card in the game that we have to try to search out our hybrids and tamers, just to make the hybrids deck work. So his on-play ability states that we get to reveal the top 5 cards of our deck, add 1 card with hybrid in its form or 10 warriors in its type, and 1 tamer from among them into our hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So the fact that this is basically looking for a Digimon or a tamer is really, really good, and it's just a very powerful card to synergize with hybrids because of his secondary ability as well, where during your turn once per turn, when your tamer digivolves, then you get to gain it 2 memory, basically making it free to digivolve into any of our hybrids. So this is just making the deck float and function a little bit better, especially since that's kind of what Green wants to do, is abuse the fact that they have cheap evolutions. So all of that just makes Bokomon a very fantastic card to use in any hybrid-based deck. Next, on to the level 4s, I'm going to be running 2 copies of Arbormon. So this is one of the original hybrids that we got all the way back in BT06, and well, because the hybrid, it's still a card we want to use, just because we could use his ability to digivolve him on top of a tamer, as if that tamer was a level 3 Digimon. Not all the time we're going to be doing that, so if you wanted to, you could take this out for just another utility card to try to round out your level 4 package, and this is all intents and purposes another flex spot as a result, but I really do just like Arbormon because I want to try to consistently see our hybrids because that's what a lot of the deck is focused around. Next up, I'm going to be running 4 copies of Beetlemon. So Beetlemon is one of the new hybrids to come out in BT07, and this card is really good because, well, it's a hybrid that allows us to digivolve him on top of a Tamer, as if that Tamer was a level 3 Digimon. So nothing special there for a hybrid, but he does have a really good when digivolving ability that adds to the overall consistency of the deck, where you get to reveal the top 5 cards and add 1 card with hybrid in its traits and 1 JP from among them into your hand, and then the rest go to the bottom. So this is another consistency tool for the deck to use, which green kind of was lacking, so it's a really good card to use to help dig out your parts and pieces, similar to some of the other cards that we were already running in the deck to try to increase its overall consistency. And then the last level 4 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of MetalKabuterimon. So MetalKabuterimon is another hybrid, one of those hybrids where there's just a whole bunch of different ways we could evolve it. We could digivolve it on top of a level 3 for 3, on top of a level 4 for 1, and on top of a Tamer for 2. So there's just a lot of different ways we could use this card, and this card also has a pretty decent when digivolving ability, where if you have a card with hybrid in its traits or JP underneath him in his Digivolution source, then you get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon with 6000 DP or less, so that way you could try to attack into it and delete it with this card. So he's just another classic green card doing classical green things. And speaking of classic green cards, next onto the level 5s, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Argomon. So we're just using this card just for the speed of evolution, just because Digisorption 3 is really good, basically suspending one of our Digimon already on the field to basically digivolve this card for 0s to easily get up into our level 6s. And we want to do that because all of our level 6s are really, really strong. And then he has a pretty good when attacking ability of when attacking, not limited to once per turn, you may play a green level 3 Digimon from your hand suspended for free. So we even have the added benefit of being able to play our lower level Digimon for free, and as I always stated, free value is good value, especially since we're starting to see more level 3s in green with halfway decent on play abilities to try to take advantage of. Next, I'm going to be running 3 copies of Blossomon, just because Blossomon is doing something very similar to Argomon, except it doesn't have an inheritable ability, and we only care about its Digisorption 3 ability to basically evo into this card for free when we need to. And then the last level 5 of the deck is going to be 4 copies of RhinoKabuterimon. So RhinoKabuterimon is a level 5 hybrid Digimon that we want to take advantage of, not only just for our hybrids, but for our Insectoid synergy as well, because he is also an Insectoid. So what we could do with this card is we could actually evo him for 1 if we're digivolving him on top of a Digimon with a Tamer in its Digivolution source. So getting up into our higher stages as quickly as we possibly can is never a bad thing, and something green already wants to do. So the fact that we're able to use that ability to speed up into our higher stages is really, really good, especially since he has his own when attacking ability that lets us speed up into our higher stages even faster, just because his when attacking ability states that if a card with hybrid or insectoids is in this Digimon's Digivolution source, then this Digimon can digivolve into an insectoid or 10 warriors in its traits from your hand for 3. So the fact that a lot of our evolutions normally would cost a lot, and with RhinoKabuterimon they actually don't, makes him just the ideal card to use, especially in combination with the Classic Collection version of Tentomon, so that way we could build a stack with him in the raising, move him out, swing, and then basically digivolve into a Mega for 2, which is really, really powerful considering all of our Megas have relatively high costs. Even though he won't be able to digivolve into all of them, the fact that he could still make us digivolve into a Mega for 2 with Tentomon or 3 at worst is very, very nice. And then speaking of our Megas, next I'm going to be running 3 copies of Nidhoggmon. So Nidhoggmon is still one of the best, if not the best green level 6 that we currently have to be playing around with, just because his when digivolving ability of Digiburst 4 is that powerful, where we get to suspend all of the opponent's Digimon with 5000 DP or less, and then we get to place all of their suspended Digimon. Doesn't matter if he's the one who suspended it or if it was already suspended. But regardless, the fact that he puts all of the opponent's suspended Digimon to the bottom of their deck makes him one of the most ideal ways of removing cards on the field. So green has lots of ways of suspending the opponent's Digimon, and green has easy ways to Digivolve up into their higher stages. Even though we can't necessarily reduce his Digivolution cost without some very specific help, it's still a good card to use just to try to get rid of the opponent's field if they have a relatively wide field, especially if that field is small enough. Next up, I'm going to be running 2 copies of AncientTroymon. So AncientTroymon is a 10 warrior traded Digimon, so it can work off of RhinoKabuterimon, and it does have really good synergy with being a card you could search off of Bokomon. And on top of that, he has this really nice ability where during the opponent's turn, when an opponent's Digimon attacks, then you get to suspend up to 2 of their Digimon without blocker. So this is a really good card to sit on the field and be a good defensive card, suspending the opponent's other Digimon down outside of the one attacking, so that way we could try to halt some of their aggression. And then on top of that, he has a nice on-delete ability that just lets us play a level 4 or lower green Digimon with hybrid in its forms from our hand for free, so that way he actually replaces himself when he eventually gets deleted, if he even gets deleted, making him one of the best defensive backbones for the deck to be using. And then the last level 6 of the deck is going to be 3 copies of AncientBeetlemon. So just as a thing to note, AncientBeetlemon is an ancient insect, and he is a 10 warriors, so there is just lots of native synergy that the deck is built around, more focused around this card in particular, making him a really good card to use just because of those synergies. Then on top of that, he has a really good ability where during your turn, once per turn, when one of your Digimon with 10 warriors in its type or hybrid in its form deletes an opponent's Digimon and survives the battle, then you get to trash the top card of the opponent's security stack. So this is really, really powerful because it's basically piercing without the piercing, and if you add piercing on top of this through one of the other cards, which I'll get into in just a moment, then you could deal lots of damage relatively quickly, but even at worst, just having this card pick off the opponent's Digimon and safely burn the opponent's security is still very, very powerful just because there's lots of powerful security effects that you might not even want to try to deal with. And the fact that this extends not only to just this card, but to various other cards in our deck means that we could use lots of different cards to aggress with onto the opponent's Digimon if we're able to use some of our other cards to try to control and mitigate their field. And then on top of that, he has the classic on-delete ability that a lot of these ancients have, where we just get to play a green level 4 or lower Digimon with hybrid in its traits from our hand for free, replacing himself when he gets deleted. Next, onto the options, I'm going to be running 1 copy of Hidden Potential Discovered. So Hidden Potential Discovered is just that good of a card because it allows us to easily climb our stages with. More often than not, you're going to use this card to go from your level 5 to your level 6, just because a lot of our level 6s have really high evolution costs, and if we're not using RhinoKabuterimon, then we do have to actually pay those full costs. But what this card does is it allows us to try to mitigate that, where the next time one of our green Digimon Digivolves this turn, then we get to suspend one of our Digimon to reduce the Digivolution cost by 5. So basically it just means free evolution on top of our level 5s into our level 6s, and that's what we really want to try to just speed up into our higher stages, so that way we can try to get as many of our higher stages out as quickly as we possibly can to rack up lots of additional value. And then it has the nice security ability of adding this card into our hand, so that way we could use this card when we need to. And then the last option card of the deck is going to be 3 copies of Thunder Laser. So Thunder Laser is a 1-costed green option card, so it's already a really efficient card for us to be using, and it has the nice main ability where if we have a Digimon with hybrid or 10 warriors in its traits in play, then we get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon down, allowing us to try to use that to pick apart the opponent's field, to then try to trigger effects like AncientBeetlemon, to then burn the opponent's security. So this is currently the best suspense option that we have, because it is the cheapest suspend option that we have to try to control the opponent's field with. But it does have the security ability on top of that, where you get to add this card into your hand. Unfortunately, it doesn't suspend anything from our security, but at least we get to use the card, and at least it's a very cheap card to use the following turn. And then lastly, onto the Tamers. You can't run a hybrid deck without Tamers, and I'm going to be running 2 copies of Mimi. So Mimi is going to be that stereotypical memory fixer, where if our memory is ever less than 3, she'll just always hard set us 3, so that way we could A, not be memory starved, and B, always have memory to make our plays as efficient as we possibly can. And on top of that, she also has a really good upside, where her main ability states that if we have a level 5 green Digimon in play, then we get to suspend this tamer to basically get another raising phase, so that way we could turbo out our raising area to be relatively aggressive with it. And then the last tamer of the deck is going to be 4 copies of JP. So JP kinda is the glue that ties the deck together, just because his inheritable ability gives up piercing. So this just allows our hybrids to be relatively aggressive with, or even any level 6 that we have that's using our hybrids as a mid-stage to also be relatively aggressive with if they don't naturally have the piercing ability. So none of our cards that right now currently have piercing, so the fact that we need JP to give them piercing is relatively valuable. And then on top of that, he also has a very green ability, where during your turn, when this tamer digivolves into a green Digimon, then we get to reduce the memory cost of that Digivolution by 1, so that way digivolving him into our hybrids will make that even cheaper. On top of that, you could combo this with Bokomon to essentially net 1 memory for digivolving into your hybrids, so that way you could climb your stages even faster than you normally would for your average hybrid-based deck, making JP just an absolutely insane card for the deck to be using. And then there's still just a whole bunch of other things that you could do in the deck depending on how you want to tech the deck and what cards you want to be focusing on and including. So you could just run some relatively decent rookies, just because green actually has some decent rookies to be playing around with in the form of Agumon as just a stereotypical DP boost, and we even have Terriermon to try to shut off the opponent's memory manipulating shenanigans. Then if you wanted to run an aggressive Digiburst-esque package, then you could even use Terriermon's assistant to try to use in combination with the Digiburst eggs, so that way we could focus our level 4s on digivolving on top of our tamers instead of our level 3s. And Terriermon's assistant also is going to help the overall consistency of the deck too, just for using him. And then if you want some other decent cards to think about utilizing for your level 3s, we even have Bokomon, just to gain some additional benefit for the opponent having suspended Digimon down. And then to help suspend some of the opponent's Digimon down, we even have Palmon as another very aggressive level 3 Digimon to be using. Then, to round out what hybrids can do, you could even think about playing Nemon, just because Nemon makes it so that we could play our JPs relatively efficiently, and we could bring back any of our tamers when our Digimon are getting deleted, mainly our JPs. And then we do have the other hybrid that we got from BT06 we could think about playing with in the form of Petalgermon, on top of the fact that we do just have some relatively decent level 4s. I'm going to be highlighting Kabuterimon here because he is an insectoid, and he also is a blocker. So there's just a lot you could do with your level 4s depending on how you want to tech the deck. The level 5 slots are a little bit more competitive, so I'm not highlighting any different level 5s, but there are still other level 5s that you could run depending again on how you want to support the deck. And we even have a really interesting anti-meta card in the form of Argomon from BT05 to try to suspend the opponent's tamers down and keep them suspended, so that way it makes digivolving them into hybrids for the opponent not super great, because then those Digimon are going to be digivolving suspended. And then we do have some level 7s that we could think about utilizing. I think because this is a hybrid-based deck, highlighting Susanomon is probably your best bet, just because we could give Susanomon piercing. With JP, he naturally has security tech +2, and he could help delete the opponent's Digimon without you really needing to do anything, and he has that alternate way of digivolving on top of one of our tamers, as if that tamer was a level 6 Digimon, by placing 10 cards with a tamer or hybrid from our hand or trash to the bottom of our deck. So this is just a really powerful card to use in basically any hybrid-based deck as a good level 7. Then we do have some other interesting option cards we could think about running. So if you want to try to essentially gain memory, in quotation marks, you could run Tropical Venom to give the opponent's Digimon a debuff, delete that Digimon, and then gain some additional memory to make some more powerful follow-up plays with. Then on top of that, we also have multiple ways of suspending the opponent's Digimon down in option form. So we have Needle Spray, we have Flower Cannon, we have Blasted Disaster, and now we have Dino Memory Boost, all to try to suspend the opponent's Digimon down. But I don't think any of them are as efficient as the card that we're running. They're just all alternative options on how you could suspend the opponent's Digimon down. Then we also do have Green Memory Boost as a good consistency tool to not only gain some additional memory because it's a memory boost, but to try to dig out our green Digimon as well. Then if you want some alternative tamers, you could think about running Ken. He's also a stereotypical memory fixing tamer, so he's just a decent card to use overall if you want to include him. And speaking of decent tamers that we could think about using, you could even think about using the starter deck Izzy, just because we do want to try to suspend the opponent's Digimon down, and Izzy rewards us for doing so. And Izzy is also a relatively cheap and efficient tamer to just hard play, so that way we could digivolve him into our hybrids right away with. But for the most part, this is just what I think a general core or shell for a hybrid deck in green is going to be looking like, and I think even though it's not necessarily doing anything too unique or original, it's still utilizing lots of moving parts and pieces to do some very powerful and aggressive things with, just because green likes to A, suspend the opponent's Digimon down, B, beat up those suspended Digimon, C, gain benefit for doing so, and D, have some easy ways to digivolve up into your higher stages, so that way you could play the game a little bit faster than the opponent. Which all those things are generally good things, especially tied up and wrapped in a nice bow, thanks to the hybrid package that we just got. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.